Okay? Topic natin ngayon is Hyper-V R2. Basically, Hyper-V. And nung nag-usap kami ni Zandra about this topic, kasi ang mas gusto kong i-discuss is BitLocker, as in deep down BitLocker stuff. Pero sabi na, hindi kailangan ng Hyper-V. Kasi sure, ayun yung kailangan ng Philippines community. I'm here this evening, sa harap nyo, for you, para sabihin sa inyo that Hyper-V is not a toy na kung techie ka, Hyper-V ka, meron kang lang. Okay? Although I really love doing that, kasi nga, very practical siya, diba? Meron ka na on one very powerful machine, pwede ka mag-practice ng yung exchange or deployment knowledge. But more than that, Hyper-V is actually very useful if you want to virtualize already your servers. And virtualizing servers, hindi na siya, okay, don't treat it as something parang laruan lang yan, or we're risking a lot if you virtualize. You're gaining, okay? If you virtualize your servers, you're gaining something. For one thing, yung hardware savings, electricity and utility savings, okay, those things. Ang objective ko ngayong gabi is to discuss with you ano yung the enterprise applications of Hyper-V and how you can, if you are, say, a practitioner, IT practitioner na, say, consultant kayo or you work for a Microsoft partner or a service provider, okay, when you're planning Hyper-V for, say, for example, your customers, ano yung unahin nyo sa mga servers and how you can actually study yung network infrastructure nyo or ng clients nyo so that you will know where to implement Hyper-V. Sino mga machines ang pwede nyo gawing virtualized? Okay, actually, marami. Okay? So, it's interesting I hope this evening will be interesting for all of you and for me as well. And, ang sa akin lang is, for us to make it interesting, sasabihin ko na sa inyo that my plan, kung sino sa inyo nag-monitor na Facebook, nagko-comment ako doon, my plan is to make this a very interactive session. I have a deck of 40-something slides. Hindi kasya ng 2 oras yun. Okay? So, I just have like 4 to 5 topics in my head that I want driven this evening. And all the rest, mas gusto ko that everything becomes a more interactive session. That's why, ni-request ko si John that later on, once na-deliver ko na yung, say for example, na-drive ko na some points across, I would be welcoming questions. Mas magiging fulfilled ako doon sa evening if we make this a very interactive session. Okay ba? Interactive? Paano ka magiging interactive? Yes, no, hindi masagot. Okay? You guys will make this a more interactive session, not me. I will try not to deliver something highfalutin like hindi. Okay, hindi ko kayo bibigyan ng sobrang high-tech just to parang nandiyabang lang, alam ko to, no. Mas gusto ko, kung ano yung kailangan, you need to deliver, not more than that. Okay? What you need, yun yung gusto ko impart, not more than that. Okay? So, virtualization. Ang tagal na natin naririnig kay Microsoft to. Quite frankly, medyo okay. Kasi hindi masyadong mainit na topic in the Philippines because syempre, Philippines is not as fast pagdating sa technology. The companies are not as funded pagdating sa technology as, say, companies that are based in Singapore. Okay? Economics. It's an economics thing. Okay? So, naririnig natin kay Microsoft, we hear it from, say, FIWO, virtualization, may ACV, blah, blah, blah. Pero, sometimes we lose touch. Ako rin, okay? Because hindi ginagamit, okay? So, balikan natin. So, virtualization basically is decoupling something from something. Okay? Depende sa kung anong virtualization. Like, application virtualization is decoupling the application from other applications, okay? Server virtualization, decoupling the operating system from the hardware. So, tatanggalin natin yung dependencies ng isa dun sa isa. The reason why magandang tanggalin is because if there are possible conflicts between the two, since dinecouple mo yung dependency, most probably hindi mangyayari yung mangyayari. Example, Meron kayong application, tumatakbo sa XP, hindi tumatakbo kay Vista. Mas lalong hindi tatakbo kay Windows 7. Okay, why? Kasi si application gumagamit ng APIs na hindi applicable sa Windows 7. So, if you decouple the application from the operating system, since tatanggalin nyo yung dependency ng app dun sa operating system, tatanggalin nyo rin yung probability na mangyayari siya. So how do you do that? You implement something like Microsoft Enterprise Desktop Virtualization or MEDV, okay, which is part of the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack or MDOP. Okay? So ang mangyayari nun, yung application, tinanggal nyo from the operating system. Kasi yung application, tumatakbo pa rin sa XP on a Windows, on a virtual server instance. Pero yung application na yun, visually, nandun sa Windows 7 yung na-desktop. Okay? Pero in reality, tumatakbo siya sa Windows XP na instance. Okay? Anong maganda example? My best example there, yung I don't know if you've heard about this guy, si Christopher Estonina. Pilipino rin siya. Very expert on those things. IE. Meron tayong IE6 na application. Hindi siya talaga tumatakbo sa IE7. Kasi IE7 na yung minimum ng Windows 7. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-downgrade ng mas mababang version ng IE sa Windows 7. So no choice tayo. Wala tayong time to port the application to IE7. So no choice but to run IE6 on Windows XP pero running on MEDV. Okay, so basically, si IE is IE6, si IE tumatakbo sa XP pero visually, parang si IE6 tumatakbo sa Windows 7. But in reality, it's running on Windows XP. Tinago na lang ang operating system. Okay? So that's virtualization. Now, ang ginawa ng ating topic ngayon, which is Hyper-V, is to virtualize yung server. Okay? We decoupled the server operating system, or basically the operating system, even the client operating system for that matter, from the hardware. So since dinecouple natin sa hardware yung operating system, mawawala yung restriction natin na isang hardware, isang OS. So ano ngayon advantage nun? Since meron yung isang hardware, pwede tayong magkaroon ng multiple instances of an operating system, edi one practical application is pwede natin siyang gawin lang. Diba? Kung techie tayo, pwede natin siyang gawin lang. Imbis na maraming boxes, imagine niyo, gone are the days that we have to set up really 5 CPUs, 5 monitors, 5 keyboards, and dati, sarap na tayo, meron tayong KVM. 3, 4 na CPU, isang monitor. Ano po yung KVM? Sabay ka. Okay? Keyboard. Basta yun. So, right now, pwede tayong one physical machine, multiple operating systems. Actually, mamaya papakita ko sa inyo yung lab ko. My deployment lab. Hindi ko i-demo yung deployment itself. But on one machine, I can set up a deployment lab that pwede tayo mag-deploy ng, say, Windows 7. Pwede tayong kumuha ng image from Windows 7 and create a gold image. Okay? I call it my image factory. Okay? Pero ang pinaka-core technologies I'm using, other than the standard deployment technologies like MDT, is Hyper-V. Okay? So ano ngayon yung Hyper-V? Okay? Enough of the, I will not bore you with the marketing blah blah of Hyper-V. Alam na natin on Hyper-V. Jay, useful ba ang Hyper-V sa enterprise? I will say yes. Yes. Jay, sino ang customer mo na nag-Hyper-V? My answer is, Singapore companies are using Hyper-V already for the green blah blah stuff. Yung mga green computing. Why? Ang unang savings mo ay kuryente. Pag nagsasave ka ng kuryente, yung ACU na, yung air conditioning and heating cost mo na. So bakit? Kasi if you use Hyper-V on your servers, okay, if you virtualize yung maraming servers, edi you use less physical machines. You use less physical machines, you use less electricity, you generate less heat, and thereby, ang susunod doon, yung air conditioning mo, hindi masyadong pressure. then you save up on real estate. Considering that Singapore is a very small country, right? So, very sensitive sila sa mga ganung bagay. Okay? Jay, meron ka lang na-deploy. Deploy? No. Plan? Yes. And I'm telling you, yung customer is hindi birong customer. Okay? Hindi birong customer. Although hindi ko pwedeng sabihin ko sino, pero, kumbaga, ang masasabi ko sa inyo, I'm not lying when I'm telling you that Hyper-V is being used by very big organizations in Singapore to scale, bawasan ang kanilang hardware and save more electricity. Okay, so Hyper-V allows for unplanned downtime dahil, okay, at the core of it is Hyper-V, pag virtualize natin yung server natin magiging file lang, isang VHP, one or more VHPs. Okay? So it's just a matter of transferring, making servers offline, transferring those VHPs from one machine to another. So halimbawa, si hardware, kailangan nating upgrade ng RAM. Say for example, for any reason we need to shut down the hardware, then no problem. And we just shut down the virtual machines if we need to, then transfer the virtual machines to another machine, another physical machine, then boot them up. Okay? Which actually is the, para sa amin, the core high availability feature ng Hyper-V. It's since you decouple the hardware from the operating system, you just shut it down, transfer it into another machine, then start it up. You also have what's called live migration. You can migrate these virtual machines from one machine to another through SCVMM, System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Okay? We also have quick migration, pause the machine, and then moving from one physical machine to another. Okay? So, actually, yun yung mga features that when you do that, when you deploy Hyper-V, okay, you have those high availability stuff. There's a lot more, okay? Itong deck ko, mas maraming, pero yun yung ayoko na i-discuss sa sobrang lalim na. I just want to discuss with basics. Okay, so as far as, okay, hindi mo pala. As far as Microsoft is concerned, sige, unahan ko na. As far as Microsoft is concerned, does Microsoft have Hyper-V already implemented? Yes. Yung website ng Microsoft, when you go to www.microsoft.com/whatever, there's a very big chance that you are actually hitting a virtual machine already. Okay? If you're a member of TechNet, you go to technet.microsoft.com. As of the time of writing of this deck, hindi ko alam kung kailan talaga ginawa yung deck. 50% of the MSD and 50% of the TechNet websites are on Hyper-V already. So there's a 50% chance that you're actually hitting a virtual machine. So hindi na siya biro kasi customer facing na siya. Yun nga, later on in my recommendation, wala pa nga akong sinasabing, hindi ko nga alam kung may i-recommend ko sa inyo to virtualize a public facing machine. Mamaya sabihin ko sa inyo which ones. Okay, so say for example here, yung aking demo machine. So, whoa. Okay, so how do you say enable Hyper-V? Hyper-V is actually a role in Windows Server 2008 R2 64-bit only, pero wala na namang 32-bit ng R2, so okay na. Okay. Pero kasi available na siya sa Server 2008 pa lang. Correct me? Server 2008, may 32-bit, right? Si R2, wala na. So it's just a rule that you add roles. Add roles, okay? Pakikita natin dito si Hyper-V. That one. Okay? So you add the role, that's it. Then after you add the role, okay? So magiging available na itong yung UI ng Hyper-V, si Hyper-V Manager. Then we now add our virtual machines. Ito mga manual, wala itong mga automated, hindi ko gamit mga SCVMM stuff. Okay, so first and foremost, if you deploy Hyper-V,